live, laugh.
Howdy, 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 everybody.
Hey.
Welcome to this week's episode of Live, Laugh, Lariat. I'm Daniel.
I'm Christian.
And boy, do we have a great show for you this week. We have an interview with Ref Stache Chris Wiggins. We are going to let you know that he likes to be called Ref Stache. So
That's very important.
everybody calling him Mustache Ref, you're doing it wrong. This is straight from Chris's mouth. From now on, we do declare Ref Stache.
We live in Stache country.
We live in Stache country. We're excited about that interview. That'll be coming up for you shortly. Also excited about DPW this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be a great show.
Great show. We've got Takeshita versus Colby, which is going to be nuts.
We got Bojack defending the world title. No, he's challenging for the world title.
Challenging for the world title.
I was so used to him being champion.
Yeah, he was the champion. He led us in from the Dark Ages to where we are now. And then we have Andrew Everett versus Calvin Tankman. And what is sure going to be one of... I tweeted about this earlier this week, but I think Calvin Tankman is the hardest hitting wrestler in the world. Some of the stuff that he does literally makes me feel like I am about to like I'm the one getting hit. And that is just insane. So that's going to be a good match. And yeah, I'm excited for it.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And we have a great show lined up. And man, oh man, I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And speaking of great, let's hop into this week's episode, which is going to be an interview with Ref Stache. So we hope you guys enjoy, and we will see you at the end. How's it going, everybody? My name is Daniel.
And I'm Christian.
We're joined here by you. Is it Ref Stache or?
So I try to use Ref Stache to go branding, but DPW has labeled me as Mustache Ref. Charlotte, North Carolina has labeled me as a cop and not a referee.
Yeah.
Some people just call me Wiggins.
The man of many names.
You pick one and we'll go with it.
We'll go with Ref Stache because that's what we want to be. Pro Ref Stache here.
We're supporting the brand. It's what we do.
So we really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. I would say our introduction, it's funny that you mentioned Charlotte calls you a cop. We were at the MLW show in February, and the first match you came out, you were kind of standing there, and then the whole crowd started chanting, he's a cop, which I thought was hilarious at the time. And then
it was great.
Kind of here we are, almost at the end of the year, and now we're having a conversation with you. So that's fun. I guess we'll kind of get started. I think we're really interested in everybody's journey with wrestling because wrestling is this massively popular thing, but at the same time, it feels like it's like so small. It's hard to find people that like wrestling. It's hard to find people in that scope, but it's such a massive industry where so many people like make their living that way. Did you grow up watching wrestling? Where was your kind of like first exposure to wrestling?
I am a third generation wrestling fan.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, crazy. So I was born and raised in Augusta, Georgia, and here we have the Bell Auditorium. It's a very, very small place. It probably holds at most like maybe 3,000, 4,000 people. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather used to take my dad. They had Monday Night Wrestling. It was part of the Georgia Championship Wrestling tour kind of thing, the NWA tour. And so every Monday night, my dad would go to that. As I grew up, my grandfather tells me the story over and over and over again before he passed away. He would tell me the story over and over again. This was one story. He said, I remember one of the times I babysat you. You were 2 years old, and I was laying on the couch, and then you were standing there between the coffee table and the couch. And all I had on was wrestling on Saturday morning. And you were glued to the TV. And then you would turn around, and you'd be like, hey, I want some more. And I'd take you that little scoop of pudding and I put it right in your mouth and you turn right back around and you just got stuck on it. And that's not my memory of wrestling. That was what my family had told me for years. So it's like the story of saying, hey, I'm 37 years old now. I've been a wrestling fan since I was 2. I really don't know much more than wrestling.
It's your world.
It is my world. It's always been there. I had the pictures of me in my little onesie holding my LJN, Hulk Hogan and Hillbilly Jim from the 2-pack, on my little, Red Rider, tricycle and my wagon. I still have all those things. Every Christmas has always been like, oh, what does Christopher want? Christopher wants wrestlers. One year my grandmother bought me as many as the Globe WWE, WCW, excuse me. WCW action figures, and then it was a Hasbro's, and then as I got older, it was like yard selling my Hasbro's off so I could buy the Jacks because like the bone crunching action,
That's awesome.
you know.
That's great.
So it's always been there. I was missing family events before I even got into the wrestling business because I grew up. I was born in '85, but I didn't really understand wrestling until the mid '90s. So big hotbed Monday Night Nitro. You know, I'm 2 hours away from WCW, so I got all the little crappy Saturday night wrestlings, and you know, we got a major Nitro here. You know, when Medusa dropped the belt in the trash can, that was in Augusta, Georgia.
Wow. That's awesome.
I got to witness that, and you know, I got to see a Clash of Champions when I was growing up. I've seen a lot. I've gotten from some history moments of good stuff from that, right? These big moments. But I'm going to go ahead and just bring this one out early. I was also part of the worst wrestling pay-per-view in history, December to Dismember.
Oh, no.
Oh.
And I was in the front row. I was sitting behind Taz and Joey Styles. And there were some really corny moments, like when Sandman comes out, me and my buddy, like, you know, slap hands. We're on camera doing that, to the point where I have like a Matt Hardy sign. If you look up December to Dismember, there's a Wikipedia page for it, and they use one of my CM Punk signs as the thumbnail. So that was cool. But I also almost got kicked out because I fell asleep at the show.
No.
On camera. And yeah, so I was like, man, if WWE ever captured my face at that moment, which it's everywhere, I'm probably never going to get hired from them because of that reason. And it was rather interesting. That night we knew that Rob Van Dam was leaving WWE because his wife was sitting 3 seats down from us, and she started half of the TNA chants that night. Yeah, so I've had moments like that as far as like being a fan, but I also got that super cool moments where my first pay-per-view that I remember that I actually purchased tickets to was 2002 Royal Rumble. You know, so I got to see some cool stuff from that. You know, it's funny, like you sit here and we talked a little bit about how wrestling like brings people together, but it's a small group, right? And the one thing I would say is like there are a lot of people that like wrestling. There are very few people that will admit it, and there's even a smaller group of people that will actually admit that they love it. I feel like just listening to like the couple of podcasts you guys have produced already, you're definitely one of those guys that we call like. I have a friend that I met through independent wrestling, and he's a fan, and we call each other super fans. He's actually like 5 or 6 years older than I am, so he remembers all the 80s stuff.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
We consider each other super fans. So we're a small group of people who actually understand the business, understand how it works, but are still able to believe and like understand what we're watching and why we watch it. And it's very hard to explain to people who don't get it, like why we watch it.
It's almost like a different language too. Like when you're that deep into it, like we'll catch like ourselves saying things that like my wife, for instance, like I'll like we were watching a movie and I'll call a guy a heel, and she just looks at me like I'm the dumbest person. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
this week I was talking to my boss, and I was like, yeah, I'm kind of afraid that that Andrew has heat with me, and he's like, heat with you. I'm like, oh, wait.
Yeah, it's almost like you forget like that. No, like. It's a different world, and sometimes you kind of draw yourself back in. But you mentioned that you're a fan, and you obviously have a long history as a fan, but you're also in the business now. And one of the questions I had, which you kind of answered, is this something that are you still watching weekly? Are you still like an avid fan of wrestling? And has it changed for you being like involved with it, how you enjoy it?
Time has really just slipped away from me when it comes to wrestling. When AEW started, I was watching religiously. That really brought me back to watching wrestling. There were a few times where I dipped into like watching WWE because there were interesting things happening. 3 hours was a lot for me to watch on a Monday night. And really just the ability to have, you know, DVRs and stuff like that kind of made me go, oh, I can watch wrestling whenever I want to. And then I would forget that I actually had all these hours of wrestling to watch.
Yeah.
Right.
And part of my ADHD is like mixed with OCD. So I really have to I feel the need of watching everything in chronological order. So if I was missing like 10 weeks worth of stuff, I would have to go all the way back to the very beginning.
Start from the beginning.
And so I would get lost. I try to watch as much as I possibly can. Being in the business really didn't change my perspective of watching wrestling. I would say that there are certain things that I don't watch wrestling for anymore. I will spend time watching 3 weeks of NXT just to watch tag matches, just so I can watch the referees and see how they interact with tag matches.
Oh, that's great.
At one point in time, I ran a independent company in Augusta, Georgia, from 2012 to 2016. And I was going to every show I could possibly go to that came within 3 or 4 hours. And it was just to watch production, or it was just to watch how they tore down the ring and how they broke down their setups. Because I remember from Beyond the Mat, Paul Heyman saying, I can't compete with WCW. I can't compete with WWF. But what I can do is, hide the negatives and insinuate the positives.
Yeah, I remember that.
What I would do is I take the concept and I would say, okay, who's the best right now? And I would say WWE at the time is the best. They're probably still the best in the world, depending on like what you're really looking at.
Yeah.
But I was like, how can I take that and I can scale it down to my level? Well, I knew that television wasn't a thing here in Augusta. WWE never ran television anymore after December to Dismember. And I was like, so house shows. So I went to a lot of house shows and I would watch like how they had set up. At this time, they started like trying to rebrand their house shows and using like a video wall and doing some pre-tapes and stuff. I said, this is what an average fan sees. This is what they need to see when I run my independent show. And essentially that's what I did. Like we had 2 video screens and now pretty much every indie company has a video screen of some sorts,
Yeah.
Unless they're going to like this
really ahead of the curve too.
Yeah. And unfortunately, like for us, we were so ahead of the curve that the business, there wasn't a lot of talent. So you had Georgia wrestling and a lot of people were using the same people in Georgia. So I was trying to get guys from Florida. I was trying to get guys from Virginia, trying to get guys from North Carolina. That's essentially how I met my brother-in-law, Ethan Case. That's how I met Anthony Henry.
That's great.
That's how I met James Drake, one of the guys that's in WWE now that has mentored me for many years, D.A. Brewer. That's how I met him. I met a lot of guys through just running my show. And
awesome. That's great.
We tried to help those guys really early in their careers to see different things and see things from different perspectives. Like Anthony Henry, and I hate to throw him underneath the bus, but Anthony Henry is a beast when it comes to wrestling. We all know that.
Yeah.
But his promo skills were terrible. Like, they didn't exist. Like he just thought everything was a cadence. It's like, no, this is not a wrestling match. Like you got to take your 5-minute thought process and turn it into 60 seconds. Yeah. So we kind of worked with him and developed him and showed him that, hey, there is this thing called character and you can develop it. You do have a personality and we're going to bring it out of you to where Pro Wrestling Experience, PWX, who used to run like Charlotte and that area and Concord stuff, they gave him a huge opportunity. He was like, wait a second, we see this product down here in Augusta. Mm-hmm. You're doing this with Anthony Henry. We can do more with him now. He's not just a wrestler. So it was like opportunities like that. And that was one of my little caps, my little feather in my cap, I guess you'd say, that I did. Like I can bounce around forever. I try to give you more chronological like timeline. So I started wrestling in high school, amateur wrestler. I wanted to be a wrestler since I was in kindergarten. I knew then, like when you go to school and they make you do that, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I did not want to be a fireman. I didn't want to be a doctor. I want to be a wrestler. My dad's 6'4". My mom is 5'2". I got caught in the middle. I'm 5'9". And so when I learned I was that small, I knew it wasn't WWE material. I wanted to go to ECW when I got into high school. Eventually that shut down. WCW shut down. So I was kind of like, I'm out. I met some guys in high school that did backyard wrestling. And I was like, cool, I'll go and be a referee or a manager. And because I like psychology. That's like my favorite part of wrestling is the psychology. Yeah. And they were like, nope, you're going to be you're going to be a wrestler because you wrestled in high school. And at the time, Tough Enough came out. So that's how that's how I taught myself how to wrestle. And I could do more things than most guys could do. And eventually, like, this Backyard Fed turned into an indie company, and the indie company, got me a couple bookings outside of the Augusta area, like in Charleston and Columbia and stuff like that. And that's how I kind of met some other people, and I got more training on the road. Eventually,
That's awesome. Really cool.
company closed down, and the business partner that owned the company came to me probably like, I think it was like 4 years later, and was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about opening up the company again. Would you help me out? Like, would you go in business with me?" And I was like, "Only if you're going to go into business. Like, if we're going to do this as a business, let's do it as a business. We can book our friends, but we're going to book them based on their level of experience, like what they're going to bring to the table. If they're not working, then we got to get rid of them. And we're going to bring in people that we don't even know." And so that was like moments we brought in guys like Caleb Conley. We brought in like Cedric Alexander, Jimmy Rave, and we had Sabu, who just like called us up out of the blue before he went to Tokyo and was like, "Hey, I'm fixing to do a tour in Japan. Like, I would love to come work with you. I'm 2 hours away from you. Like, can we make some money real quick?" I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." So we met a lot of cool people, and this segues into how I became a referee. Independent referees are really hard to find, and I needed one consistently. So entrepreneur like mentality, create the solution. I'll just be a referee. I kind of joked around with it a couple of times, and eventually I kind of started doing it. And I was like, "Oh, I'm actually pretty good at this." Man, I wish I would have went to the rest of school when I got out of high school instead of going to college. I never used anything that I got from college, so great. But I became a referee, and Anthony Henry was gracious to start taking me to places. And then eventually I kind of became his driver because his driving is terrible. And I tell him that every time we go.
And driving.
We would be going in the mountains of like West Virginia, and he's got a cell phone, like watching like All Japan and driving at the same time. I'm like, bro, this is not going to work.
That's incredible. I love that.
That's dedication, though.
It really is. Like every time, I don't even ask him anymore. After I've known him, for like 10 years now. Like I don't even ask, like, what are you watching? I know it's either TikTok or about animals, or he's watching wrestling.
Yeah.
So it's just,
awesome.
I was gracious enough to tag along with him, and he introduced me to a lot of people. And the first big match that I ever got to referee was Anthony Henry versus Tommaso Ciampa. And I got to do, they wrestled each other 3 times at PWX. I got to do all 3 of those matches. And I've gotten from like, I was an Anthony Henry guy. So anybody Anthony Henry wrestled, I got to work with. So I got to work with like Matt Riddle and like Martin Stone and stuff like that. And just got to do like some really cool stuff. Going
back to PWX, my first independent show ever, and just happened right after I moved to North Carolina, was a PWX show. Ethan Case beat John Skyler in the main event for like their world title, and it was at a bar. Like I got my dad to bring me. So that's my little PWX connection, and like it was great. Like the American Wolves were there, the Bravado Brothers when they were in act were there. Like, so what a fun company.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and they had like they gave me a huge break, and gave me an opportunity to kind of get in there and go to like the next level. And I met some really cool people that way. I got to meet Kevin Pierce that way, and Frank Gassner, who works for like MLW and Impact Wrestling, and he did like stuff back with Ring of Honor, and he worked with AEW. And so it's like, getting to meet those people and just kind of rubbing elbows and just shooting a breeze with people has gotten me some opportunities that I never thought I would get. Like just random text messages like, "Hey, can you come here?" Like, yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
Awesome. I mean, I think it's really awesome that you did an independent promotion, and that's something that the average fan doesn't really get an insight to. That's really cool. What are some of the things about running like an independent promotion that like an average fan might know, or just some like, if you have any like interesting stories regarding that, or like any kind of hectic days or anything like that? We'd love to hear
it. So the company really was ran by my wife, myself, and my business partner. My business partner did a lot of the production work for me. He made sure that the videos were put together, and made sure that the guys that he had put those stuff together. My wife did all the social media for us before like social media was super big. She took pictures for us. She pretty much ran the company. I was just kind of like the Vince McMahon of making sure that everything was done. I always said that it was 29 days and 21 hours, excuse me, of work for 3 hours of enjoyment, because you're constantly working. You're making sure that your talent's going to be there. You're making sure that the building's going to be secured. You're making sure that like you have the posters out around town. The social media posts are going up. They're being repeated. You're making sure all these little things are being done. Trailers are packed. Making sure that you have the money for concessions, which my wife was really a big part of that. It's like she ran concessions, she ran the door, she, made sure that our online ticket sales were being done right. And I just kind of put the vision out there. The fun part for me was literally writing something in a book, going to people and telling them my vision, and then allowing them to kind of put their spin on it of what they thought it was. So it's like a collaboration, it's like literally, putting music together where you take an artist and you're like, hey, this is how we're going to produce this, but I need you to be the artist to kind of put your spin on it. And to see those things to come to life, like your ideas to come to life using human beings. And then those human beings would create memories for other human beings.
Yeah.
That's a great perspective.
I was stopped in a McDonald's down the street from my house. I was getting off shift one morning, and this kid came to me, and after arguing with his parents for a little bit, he finally got the courage to come up to me. He's like, "Can I ask you a question?" It's like, "Yeah." I assumed that it was going to be a fire department related question. I'm in my uniform, and he goes, "Did you used to wrestle? And was your name the Miami Bad Boy Devin Wright?" And I was like, "Yes, I did." And he turns around and he goes, "I told you it was him. I told you it was him."
That's awesome.
My company had been closed by like 5 years at that point. So like to know that the company that I was a part of, because nobody knew who the owners were. So that was a really cool thing. We were just known as the brand. We were building a brand. We were known as the Flatline Guys. So we built this brand just to make sure that memories are created for people. And that's essentially what ended up happening. And it was, that was probably like the best part, is knowing that all the hard work that you put together, that people were going to have a lifetime full of memories, or you were giving opportunities to people that never thought that they could be a part of it,
Yeah. I think like as a kid, you have a dream of course, being a wrestler, but being able to create wrestling, I think that's what we always tried to recreate in our video games growing up. The create a story mode, that's got to be awesome, just to be able to, like you said, put your thoughts on paper, work with the people, put on a show, and then ultimately create those memories.
I mean, it's like a beyond crazy concept that you have an idea, you work with people to create the idea, and then people pay money to see it. That's just so cool.
It seems like you're like the dream. Like, I mean, that's something that like one day down the road we would love to do, but like it's an awesome story. Can we talk a little bit about the Miami Bad Boy a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You want me to just dive into it, or do you have anything that just kind of pops?
Go ahead.
Jump right in.
I don't know where to start.
So before video games were really cool, we had really good creative characters and stuff. I grew up like in the WWF Warzone era, right? And then luckily we ended up getting the SmackDowns and stuff. But action figures, I used to do my own little show. I had a little like 8mm camera, and I created my own show. And I took a Shawn Michaels action figure because it was like the most acrobatic style at the time, like character, and he had really cool gear. Even though I'm not a huge Shawn Michaels fan, I'm more of a Bret Hart guy. But anyways, so
my heart, it just broke a little. It's fine. I'll get over it. But I think we're gonna have to work on this, because
a lot of my gear was after Bret Hart. So
I love that. That's great.
But yeah, so there was this really cheesy, like C-rated DC comic called Divine Right, and it was like an Archangel's kind of character, and it looked really cool. So I just like came up with this name. I took Divine Right and turned it into Devin Wright for whatever reason. I have no idea how I came up with that name, but for years I had this action figure, and it was just always like Devin Wright, Devin Wright. And as I got older as a teenager, I kind of quit playing with action figures. And I watched a lot of like Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels wrestling. My dad kind of looked like Scott Hall mixed with like a Mike Awesome kind of deal. It's kind of weird. But so a lot of people called him Razor Ramon a lot. So he would joke around. He always had a toothpick. So that was kind of cool. And then I realized that there's a similarity, not knowing that this is kind of a ripoff almost, but there was a similarity between Scarface and Razor Ramon. And I was like, cool, I'm going to mix like a modern day version of Razor Ramon and Scarface, but try to wrestle like Bret Hart and Jerry the King Lawler. Because I like the Memphis. Like I was semi-athletic, but I was really nervous about doing crazy stuff. So I didn't.
Up until that point, had you ever been to Miami?
I'd never been to Miami. I'm naturally like my mom is full-blooded Puerto Rican from the Bronx. My grandparents are from Puerto Rico. The time era that I grew up in, as far as like indie wrestling, everybody wore black and red, and my dad was like, "This is terrible," because I started off with like gym shorts and a Scarface T-shirt. And it was just like kick pads and wrestling shoes that I had from high school. And finally I found a gear maker and he was like, you need to go with something completely different. Everybody's doing the same thing. Let's go with fuchsia. And I was like, pink? He's like, no, fuchsia, like almost like a watermelon color. Mm-hmm. And where they're going to use is like royal blue in your name. So I'm also a huge Shane Douglas triple threat, ECW mark. And so I used the diamond from the triple threat. I used a Van Halen logo to use DW. Mm-hmm. And awesome. I came up with Devin Wright. I was doing a radio skit here locally to put over a benefit show. And I was wrestling this guy named Morgan McNeil, and he was the Braveheart, Morgan McNeil. And they're like, you need to have like a nickname. I don't have one. They're like, well, where are you from? It's like, from Miami, Florida. He's like, Miami Bad Boy. Cut to the radio spot. He goes, hey, now we're here with the Miami Bad Boy. And I was like, uh-oh. Like, I don't know. So that's just, I was given the name Miami Bad Boy. And that's just kind of what it was.
That's how it always works.
Yeah.
That's the good stuff. Like when you don't create your own stuff and people just kind of throw it in your lap and you go with it. But so it was a different persona of me. Like I said, I'm an introvert. So the inner part of me was like this cocky, arrogant guy who doesn't care what other people think. And I really didn't. Like as a wrestler, I could be a good guy. I really could. I knew how to do that stuff. But I was like, man, it's so easy to be a good guy. It's too easy to be a good guy. Right? In wrestling, when you're booking, you send out the heel first. That way the fans understand, hey, this is the bad guy. And the worse the bad guy, the easier job the good guy has. Right? I've always found like we're taught as humans to like other people. Right? We're taught as humans not to be rude and be mean to other people and be respectful, right? So I was like, I'm gonna have to work really hard at being rude and being mean without being cheesy, like I didn't want to go like, oh, you stink, you're a god, like, oh, the Charlotte's a terrible town. It's not even worthy of my time. Like that was terrible.
Yeah.
So what I learned through psychology and the business itself was through Jake Roberts. That if I could get one person, if I could just focus in on one person, I could eventually multiply into 3 people. 3 is going to turn into 10. 10 is going to turn into 50. 50 is going to turn into 100. 100 is going to turn into 1,000. Right? So I would work on like 2 or 3 people at a time. And that's why even when I was a good guy, I used my emotion. And it was like, I had friends tell me, like, you were a pretty good wrestler. Like your moves weren't that great because you did generic stuff. Like I did Jerry Lawler fist drop. I did Shawn Michaels elbow. Like I did a patent Shawn Michaels elbow drop, the whole like, thing. But my ability to sell made people believe that like, he's really hurt. Like, I think that this guy is legitimately hurt and we need to get behind him. And it was just it's a lot of theatrics. It's a lot of emotion. And I really like the ability to control people through whatever actions I have. So like as a bad guy, I was able to go out there and just give people dirty looks, just do dumb things like spitting gum on the ground in front of somebody. People would get blowed. They would go to my mom and be like, your son's a terrible human being. How did you raise this kid? you know. So that was kind of my thing. It was kind of the wrestling style. Like I said, was like Bret Hart with a little bit of Jerry Lawler from Memphis kind of stuff, and but the attitude was like Scarface, Razor Ramon, a little bit of franchise Shane Douglas. Maybe a time or two I would throw in a little bit of Steve Austin or something just because that was relevant.
Awesome. Did you have a catchphrase? Cool way to end the promo.
I never came up with a catchphrase. I never did.
It's really okay.
Yeah, I was all over the place. Like I had 3 different wrestling characters that I've done. I've done all 3 of them at the same time, and
like
they were
style.
In a way. I was doing 2 characters in one show, and one character I could not get over at a show, so I ended up doing this character probably like another 3 hours outside of my town. I tried bringing it to where I lived, and they're like, "Nah, we remember you. You're the Miami bad boy." I believe in wrestling that really good characters are a piece of you. They don't have to be you turned up to 11, but they're a piece of you and something that you can relate, that you can put over, and you figure out how to connect with other people. So I went through a time when I graduated from high school where just kind of in the dumps, and like my girlfriend broke up with me. She took off out of town. We had all these great like summer plans, and I just quit my job, and I had no idea what to do. So I was just really angry, and I got a hold of FMW tapes, and I fell in love with Terry Funk. And I also have been a huge Cactus Jack and Mankind fan. So I love the psychology that Mankind brought in his early days. So I mixed kind of a Al Snow, Mankind, Cactus Jack, Terry Funk character together. And I called him Damien. And it was this lucha mask it was supposed to be a devil lucha mask. I don't even remember what character it was ripped off. It was really cheap, corny mask. And instead of having head, I had a pig. It was a stuffed pig. In my mind, I believed this pig was real and he was my best friend. So I went around running around doing hardcore wrestling, doing tables, ladders, chairs, barbed wire, whatever I get my hands on, just to kind of get that rage out, and eventually turned into like a cartoon character at one of my shows and just kind of ran off the field with that. And then I got into really big conspiracy theories in one time or another, and I came up with a character called Yasir Akbar. I bought the headdress. I bought everything from like Afghanistan and Iran, and had a guy like tell me how to properly put it on. I did the camel clutch, but I did it differently. Like I would use the opponent's arm to basically put a chokehold on. So they were like choking themselves out as I had them in the camel clutch, and I had like, Arabic writing on my pants and stuff. And I did this like a really, really small town. So it got over. It's probably the most heat I ever had in my life. I was threatened, to get stabbed, beat up with brass knucks, threatened to have my tires slashed. I had to drive different cars to the venue, had people escort me out. I had an old lady almost fall over a guardrail because she was swinging her cane at me. But the character was right after Muhammad Hassan got released. And I was like, I like the conspiracy theory of like, well, how did America really treat Arab Americans at that time? And I took the perspective of what happened in 9/11 when I was in high school and how I perceived it. But then I looked at it as how somebody who was an Arab American descent would get treated during the time frame that all this was going on. And I kind of did some research on that. And I use that against, the fans of just saying, like, how do you take this teenage boy that this crisis happened in terrifying moment in time that I had nothing to do with it, but because the color of my skin, because my name, you really just turn on me. And it's like people that I trusted, teachers, coaches, best friends, neighbors, everybody looked at me as I was this enemy where I had nothing to do with it. Now I'm going to take that rage and I'm going to get my word out. And the best way I know how is through wrestling. Like I have an opportunity to talk, but when I'm done talking, you'll realize in the ring, I'm going to prove to you that Americans are weak, and
Awesome.
90% of that is the greatest babyface promo I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Like it's weird that like it's babyface until the switch, and then it's like, but now I'm going to use this on you. Which I think is every great bad guy gimmick is it makes sense. It's like this is a rational perspective until the switch, and then it's like, but this is where he went wrong, kind of thing. But like that's
because everything in wrestling is really just confrontation. Conflict. Everybody likes conflict and confrontation. They want to see people confront the other guy for being a crappy person, and that's like really where good writing comes from, and good psychology and stuff like that. And it does, like, I never really thought about it being I looked at it as at times like I wasn't wrong. The way I feel shouldn't be looked at as wrong. Like you're wrong, and people really did not like it. The booker, I had to have a huge control. Like I was just getting back into the business and I wanted to do something fresh. So I pitched him 5 minutes of this whole storyline and told him, like, this is who I could wrestle. This is what I would look like. This is how I would run my promos. This is how we could run this. And I did like probably 3 to 4 weeks of just promos before I even wrestled. And eventually he kind of lost sight of it. And he was like, oh, we're going to do like this terrorist thing. And I was like, nope, I'm out. This is not what it's supposed to be about. I'm not a terrorist. I'm not supposed to do any of this stuff. And it went crazy. And I was like, okay, I'm out. Like I've lost control over my character. It's time for me to go. And that's really the beautiful thing about independent wrestling is that you have that opportunity to kind of say, like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm gonna go somewhere else.
Yeah. Take my ball and go home.
Yeah.
So growing up, who was your favorite wrestler? And why was it clearly Rick Steiner?
This mustache is only 2 years old. It actually, December 1st is his birthday. I actually told my wife, it's like, you gotta say happy birthday to the stash. Like, he's 2 years old. Happy birthday. I loved Rick Steiner as a kid, believe it or not. Rick and Scott were like really cool. They're one of the few tag teams that I really enjoy watching. I grew up like every other kid in the 80s liking Hulk Hogan. As I got a little bit older, and really listening to my dad talk about wrestling, he was a huge Bret Hart fan. And I understood why he liked Bret Hart, because he was so clean and crisp about what he did. He was almost as close as you get to a perfectionist when it came to wrestling. And so I grew up hating Shawn Michaels, dramatically hating Shawn Michaels. Not for the reasons why I hate him now, but for the fact that, like, I loved how clean and crisp Bret Hart was, and just Shawn Michaels was kind of all over the place. And my cousins loved Shawn Michaels. So I was like, of course you guys do. You guys are all over the place. You love this guy. That's why you would love him. And as time went on, I started enjoying Macho Man Randy Savage. As I got into my 20s, I really loved Macho Man. I learned like so much just by watching his promos, like how to carry himself. The way he carried himself in the ring, I kind of carry myself as a person now. And like when I walk around, and I had a promoter tell me this not too long ago. He said, I need you to stop getting so big. I was like, oh man, am I gaining too much weight? He's like, no, like you look really muscular, and I'm gonna need you to tone it down because you're making my wrestlers look bad. And I was like, well, maybe your wrestlers need to get bigger. But it's just because I just kind of carry myself big. I throw my shoulders out. I stand up tall. I make sure that I don't look at the crowd. I look over the crowd. And that was like some of the things that Macho Man did, because Macho Man was such a small dude, far as in height, when he was in the era of giants. And even though he had like some of the most like meaningless promos, they're some of the most memorable just because he brought character, right? And that's why so many people loved him. And that's one of the things I was like, man, this guy is so like, you don't have to be in the building to feel his energy. You can get it off the television screen. And like as writing scripts or trying to book matches or ideas of vignettes and stuff, I was like, this is one of the guys that I want to look at just to see how he carries himself, how he, looks into the camera, how he brings emotion out. And then you go into the ring and you watch the stuff that he did, and it was just like, so like boom, boom, boom. Everything was just there. And that was like one of the things I grew up in the Attitude Era. So, I liked DX and The Rock and Steve Austin. And, so
I don't know. Shawn Michaels is in DX. That is true,
but I was not that version of DX of a fan. I was Triple H, China, the New Age Outlaws. Come on, like
yeah.
I will give Shawn Michaels his due. Like Shawn Michaels ultimately is one of the most athletic wrestlers. He's one of the most charismatic. As the business side of it, from a wrestling fan, I give his credit. Like he's good. He's great. Like let's be honest, he's great. But from a business side, my argument always was that if Shawn Michaels never got his second run in WWE, he would have never been the great one. He would have never been as good as he is now. Like like people's perspective of him from the business perspective in his later years before he quit the first go was just so bad. Like he was just so hard to deal with and so hard to work with. And I've dealt with people like that from a business perspective. And I was like, nope. Like I had a 2 strike out rule. Like if you struck out with me twice, that was it. I was never going to let you burn me a third time.
That's good.
And it was just like, get out of here.
The weird thing for me, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, is Shawn like I started watching in 2008. A little bit late to it, but the version of Shawn Michaels I knew was just the veteran, good work rate, like good guy. Like the first Raw I ever watched was when Jericho threw him through the Jeritrons. I was instantly the biggest Shawn Michaels fan because I'm like, oh, this guy, like he's the freaking man. Come like years later, like you're doing research on stuff. And I'm like, oh my god, same guy? What?
Yeah.
It's a good stark contrast when it comes to him, and him versus Brett, one of the all-time great rivalries, and it kind of like defines like, oh, are you a Brett guy, or are you a Shawn guy? It kind of like puts you into a category as like a wrestling fan as well. Like you can kind of tell like who are you like, or know a little bit more about somebody based off of like, it's like, are you a Democrat or Republican? Are you a Brett or are you a Shawn guy? It's kind of like a political party for wrestlers.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah, awesome. You're right. You're really like a lot of people do that, and it kind of funny because like so you have that era, and then you go down. It's like, so were you The Rock or were you a Stone Cold Steve Austin fan?
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
But though, like, there's unfortunately to that answer, like, there's no wrong answer for that one because they're both like super amazing. You know?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
It's ridiculous. And then 10 years later, you have a couple more options, but it really turns into Cena or Randy Orton, but just same kind of thing. But you can make the argument with Cena with so many guys.
Yeah, I give. I'm not like okay. So I believe in life. You're only allowed to hate one person at a time. And so probably for like 15 years, I have hated John Cena. I do not like John Cena. He solidified my hate. I don't remember how many last man standing matches he had, right? Between Batista, JBL, and Randy Orton. Yeah. There was a moment, I think he had one with Randy Orton, and Randy Orton just beat the living crap out of him for like a solid 10, 15 minutes. And then all of a sudden, he just like Supermaned up, and I was like, man, like I can just throw belief out the window all the time, but you can't tell me that you just got beat up for like 15 minutes, and all of a sudden you can just do all this crazy stuff.
Is that any different than Hogan, though? I mean, it's so it's same. It's the Hogan formula. It's the same deal.
I think that's why he's had such a wild, like, because you loved Hogan as a kid. A lot of the kids are big John Cena fans. It's like the superhero, the Superman. Like no matter what, he's going to win the fight. And I think like as you get older and you experience life, it's like that's almost, not how it works.
It's almost from like a booking perspective that Vince took that same thing. Hulk Hogan made more money than anyone in the history of the business, and I think he just took the same thing with Cena, and it was fine. It made money, but I think it was just this worked in the past, and I'm not going to look ahead to where wrestling is going. I'm going to keep it there. And I think that's why a lot of people can't stand Cena, is not so much because it's Cena, because eventually he turned into a really good worker and like great matches with all kinds of guys. But yeah, like, did you get what I'm saying with that?
And I think at a certain point you kind of realize that WWE is not necessarily for us anymore. We went to a Raw maybe 3 or 4 months ago. It was the drizzling shits. Like
we left,
but the kids in front of us were having the time of our lives, and I was like, "This isn't for us." Like, there's independent wrestling, there's AEW, there's so much like All Japan and WCW, like so much stuff you can watch that maybe this is for the kids. Like this is what we fell in love with as kids, and at a certain point, you kind of mature onto like different things.
Yeah, you think about it from like a business standpoint. They taught your parents to watch, like, well, for the most part, it's like they taught my dad, like, this is wrestling. He grew up on like Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair and Arn Anderson and stuff like that. And then you have like my generation of early childhood wrestling. Like, the money's in the kids. It's always in the kids, from a huge standpoint. And that's something that I've had discussions with like other guys in the business of that. They're like, we're hitting this brick wall. We're doing like 700,000 people. And we want to go to the next level. It's like, well, you have to figure out how to get out of the niche style of wrestling and start finding how to get the broad spectrum. You're going to have to get the parents who don't really like watching wrestling. They're willing to bring their 8, 9-year-old to a wrestling show. You're going to have to present that some way, somehow. And sometimes they listen and sometimes they don't. And then eventually they just kind of fade away. But you're absolutely right. They've taught generation after generation. And now it's like this reset. It's like, oh, now we got the Attitude Era kids that decided to have children, and we're not the same product anymore. So here we go. You're going to bring your little kids to the show, which there's little parts of it that have kind of caught wind. Pat McAfee coming in and Roman Reigns kind of doing a little bit of a 180, maybe with what we expected John Cena to do at one time or another that never happened.
That's so cool.
So it's there are little bits and pieces that are there for us, but I agree. I don't believe that there's enough to gain our attention full time. And you're going to pick up those little clips, off of social media and whatnot. And that's pretty much what you're going to get your hits on.
It's almost like the Pixar movies. There's always like a little bit for the parents. Like the movie's not for you, but they understand that you're watching. So they'll give you a bone. They'll put a joke here that your kids won't get, but you will, or kind of that story.
I know this is going to sound a little weird. I'm going to take John Cena and compare him to Barney. Okay. The reason why I'm doing this is because I think it was Peacock just did there's like 4 or 5 episodes on Barney and why it was like so hated by a generation. Like the adults hated Barney so much, right? As kids, they were like, oh, I love it, right? So kids love repetition. They love stability. John Cena, same moves over and over again, right? So they were easy. It was stuff easy to recognize. They could do the same stuff over and over again with their friends. They could do the same stuff over and over again. And it was wholesome. Like John Cena is wholesome. He's the clean cut, good looking American guy, looks good, big muscles, tells all the cool, funny jokes, does all the cool stuff, beats all the cool people, all the bad guys up and stuff like that. And that's essentially like Barney was. Barney was wholesome. He was so nice. He was stability. He did the same thing over and over again. And we as adults don't believe in that bullcrap because we're like, hey, that's not real life. Like, the good guy doesn't win every time. We don't all love each other, So it's just those are kind of the things of like where I was like, man, as like psychology was, that's kind of why I didn't like John Cena so much because I loved rapper Cena. I loved watching John Cena on the Indies as the prototype, but John Cena outside this, with the spinner championship belt and all that. So I was like, I'm out. I'm tapping out. I'm out. Kind of same thing with Roman Reigns. At one point or another, I was like, I'm tapping out. I'm out of here. I can't sit here and protect you anymore, Roman. Like, you got to go.
And he really turned it around.
He turned it around big time.
Yeah.
He's the man. We
want to make sure that you're cognizant every time. We got like a little bit of like a rapid, just like a few questions that should be kind of easy for you to answer. To kind of close this interview off. I think it's been really great. We appreciate you coming on. I guess this will be as far as like being a referee. How involved are you in the match preparation with the wrestlers? Like, is it something where you talk ahead of time or kind of try to plan things out?
Depends on how. I would say average referees, they get the finish and maybe some of the business that goes on, like, oh, the manager's going to get involved or, hey, don't see this, don't see that kind of thing, right?
Okay.
I tried to get my feet in the door and then plant them very firmly. And I will listen to the matches as much as the guys are comfortable with me, I try to get comfortable with them. And if they're extremely comfortable with me, I at times will tell them, hey, from a referee's perspective, this looks really dumb. And sometimes I'm very comfortable with them that I can almost agent some of the match. Like, hey, don't do that. It's not going to make any sense. Maybe we should try doing it this way. It was one of the things that I did for a couple matches in MLW while I was with them for my like 3 or 4 shows that I did with them. It was kind of coming out and saying like, hey, that's a good idea. But from my perspective, this doesn't make any sense. Like, you know, why would this guy do this? And why would that guy just stand there and just watch his tag team partner do that? That would make no sense to me. And some of the guys like, and another agent would come in and say like, oh yeah, that doesn't make any sense. You know? But on average, most referees just kind of get told like, this is what's going on and that's it. It becomes like, you have to show how professional you are. You have to see how smart you are. And like the guys, the more you work with wrestlers, the more they get comfortable with you and the more they're willing to take your insight.
That's a really cool insight into the world that I don't think a lot of us really get to see. So I appreciate you sharing that. Another question: what would you say is the favorite match that you've had the opportunity to call? Ooh. Or I don't know if that's the correct term, but
no, it's good. Yeah, that's right now. It would be man. It was Workhorsemen and Violence is Forever. I'm not a huge tag team wrestling fan, especially not on an independent level, because it's just too much Young Bucks stuff. It's like boom, 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 too fast. Yeah. It's not enough time for people to register stuff, and it's like rule breaking everywhere. Who cares, right? But that match was great from top to bottom, and they went the full time limit.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was just, it was super awesome. I thoroughly enjoy working with the Workhorsemen. They're one of the most professional tag teams that I've worked with, along with Chance Riser and Patty Daddy. Those guys are really awesome. I know, but they're great. Love them or hate them. They're very professional, and they understand the psychology of tag. Tag. They know how to work it. They're trying their best to work it. And I think as young as they are, if they keep going that same direction and keep on using and meeting the right people that they're meeting now and obtaining, because they're coachable. They're probably my 3rd favorite tag team right now. My top is FTR, Workhorsemen, and then, you know, Patty and Chance. Those are really fun to work with. Yeah, so I'm waiting for a Workhorseman and NDA match. Like I'm waiting. Like I hope I get to referee that match.
I thought after it didn't end up happening at the last CBW show, I'm convinced like anniversary show. They gotta do it.
Right.
But yeah, it's awesome. That Balance is Forever, Workhorseman. We were there. That was next level. And you're right about the NDA. They're like, they do their role perfectly, and they're really fun tag team to watch. So just another question is, this might kind of echo into the last bit. What are some wrestlers that you think more people should know about?
Oh, man, because there's so many. I'm going to go with right off the top. Sean Legacy is a guy from Augusta, Georgia. He trains with Ethan Case at the Palmetto Wrestling Academy. He just did a NOAH seminar, and he did a NOAH camp, and he's supposed to be doing a tour with them in Japan soon. So hopefully he'll finally get that break. He's a good coachable kid. He's very young. He does exactly what he's supposed to do. He listens, he takes information, and he cycles that and uses that information. Chip Day from out of Atlanta. He's somebody who should be seen more. He's kind of with the same guys with like Slim J that just kind of toured the same areas and just haven't hit that area to just kind of jump out and go somewhere. Now that Slim J's like doing all the AEW stuff, so that's great.
Yeah.
BK Westbrook totally should be out there. And Bojack, oh man, Bojack has grown so much in the last like two years. Anybody who's on the DPW roster that nobody that just kind of runs in the Carolinas right now, I think are just DPW. I can't. I sit back and I watch them. And it's like I begged to be on their show. Like I drove like 4.5 hours multiple times to say like, hey, can I meet you? Because I had heard all this buzz about it, and like watching these shows, like, man, this is amazing. Like this is really cool. Like they have this following that's building them up. And so I was just like, I got to get it on the ground level. I didn't know what I was really getting into. And then like seeing Chance Riser and Patrick, like those guys come in and just tear the house down and just go bananas, you know, like it's unbelievable. And then they're like, oh man, they're bringing in guys from Japan, you know, from Dragon Gate, and then, you know, they're bringing in AEW guys. Like, wow, this is amazing. But those are some of the people that I can come off like, that's a hard question for me to answer because there's so many guys that I work with that I really like, but those are definitely the guys that popped in my head really quick.
Yeah, DPW is something special. Once we went to the first show, it was like, yeah, this is where we're going to be every month, like, no matter what. We had to miss last month go to a wedding, but I'm missing my wife's Christmas party to go to on Saturday, so it's a little bit of hot water, but I'm not going to miss that. I think I have one last joke. One last question. Do you have a favorite joke?
Man, I do, but it's not a favorite joke. It's a fair. It's okay. So, it's a knock knock joke. So, knock knock.
Okay.
Who's there?
9/11.
9/11 who?
I thought you would never forget.
I thought you were going to go somewhere else. And I was a little worried at first, I'll be honest with you, but you brought it home, I think.
Yeah.
You have any other questions?
Yeah. And this is just something I'm curious about, but this is something I just ask people in life, because it's the season. What's your favorite and least favorite Christmas movie?
Oh man. Favorite Christmas movie would be Home Alone. And I think my least favorite would probably be, as I'm probably going to get some heat for this one, National Lampoon's like Christmas Vacation. I'm not a Chevy Chase. I'm not a Chevy Chase fan. Like I've tried watching that so many times, and it's like I don't get it. Like I get the whole like one-liners and stuff like that, but it's just not my cup of tea. Like I love Home Alone, so
that's completely fine. You're a Home Alone guy. It's like a Brett versus Sean, but with Christmas movies. Either like Home Alone or you like National Lampoon.
It's one or the other.
Can we find the common ground that Die Hard is really not a Christmas movie?
The Christmas season does not begin until Die Hard finishes. Sorry, I don't make the rules. I don't make the rules here.
Yeah. Well, we really enjoyed talking to you. I feel like you've got so many stories. We'd love to have you back on again sometime because you've just been a great listen. But we appreciate your time, and we will let you get back to your night. And we'll probably see you this Saturday. Hopefully, killing it in I don't know what the term for like a great performance with wrestling or with the refereeing is, but whatever that equates to, we're wishing it the best for you.
Great referees are often heard but never seen. That's the big key. You know, like we want to know you're there when you need to be there. Other than that, get out of the way. That's really what it is. We're a stagehand. That's really what a referee is. A referee is just a stagehand. We're moving people left, right, and like when you get into doing TV and stuff like that, you're moving people in direction, and there's a lot of detail that go into that, but. That's for another podcast for another day. I appreciate you guys having me. That was fun. I was like, man, we've been doing this for an hour. That's awesome.
It's kind of flown by. But we appreciate your time, and we will hopefully have you on again someday. But have a great night.
Yeah, you too. We'll see you this weekend.
All right. We hope you guys enjoyed that interview with Ref Stache Chris Wiggins. The man, full of knowledge. We'll definitely have to have him back on to talk some more. So we hope you guys have a good week. Enjoy the show. Enjoy life. Have a great one.
Live, laugh.
Howdy, everybody.
Hey.
Welcome to this week's episode of Live, Laugh, Lariat. I'm Daniel.
I'm Christian.
And boy, do we have a great show for you this week. We have an interview with Ref Stache